But before we get started, just wanted to remind this is just an informational session. And if you have if you're looking for any legal advice, please consult your CPA or attorneys. So today's our special guest is Matt Picheny. He's a real estate investor, Tony Award winner, and author of #1 best-selling book, The Backstage Guide to Real Estate. He's focused on developing passive income streams that enable investors to write their own story and choose how they want to spend their time. Write their own story. I love it. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear your story. So I'm going to start with my favorite question that I ask everybody whosoever comes to my show is, tell me about yourself, where you are right now in your life, professionally as well as personally.
I'm in a place now that I set the course to hit about 6 years ago. I am a full-time real estate investor. I have been for quite some time. I syndicate real estate deals, and I have some freedom in choices of my time, so that I'm able to write my own story. And so for me, that involves not only investing in real estate, but teaming up with my wife, and together we've invested in some Broadway shows, which has been a lot of fun. And I have 2 beautiful little girls, and we live in Brooklyn, New York. And that's me as of right now.
Nice. So tell me about your background a little bit. Where did you grow up, and how did you become what you are today?
Sure. I grew up in Orlando, Florida. I moved to New York City in 1992 to pursue a career as a performer, as an actor, singer, and dancer. And I went to a musical theater conservatory. I graduated from there. And then I went off and performed in shows all across the country for about 5 years. I was in 15 different productions, professional productions throughout the US and also Canada. And I had a blast, had the time of my life doing that. But I also had another opportunity, because this was the late 90s. The internet was becoming a big thing. And I started tinkering around with computers and had a lot of fun doing that. I was able to create my own advertising agency, my own little digital marketing agency, where we would develop websites for large companies. Along came 2001, and the dot-com bubble burst. A lot of my clients were either going out of business or not spending money on any digital marketing efforts. So my business was imploding because of that. I mean, it was bad. And it just so happened that at that time, for where I was living, my landlord said to me, you've got 90 days to get out of your apartment. So yeah, it couldn't have come at a worse time. And so I needed to find a place to live. I also needed to find a job, because how am I going to get a place in New York City with no income really to speak of, no way to sort of prove that income? So Showtime, the cable television channel, was a client of mine, and they offered me a position to go in-house. And I was looking to rent an apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. That's where I had first moved to New York. I lived there. I loved that part of the city. But at that same time, I also saw my sister lived up in Washington Heights, which is about 30 minutes north, in upper Manhattan. But she saw an ad on a bulletin board for an apartment to buy. It was co-op. And I ran the numbers, and it made a lot more sense from a monthly basis to buy the apartment. But also I knew I would be gaining equity, right? Gaining some ownership in a property. I bought that property, and a little more than 2 years later, I sold the property, and I more than quadrupled my initial investment. And that's when the light bulb really went off in my head. Wow. Yeah, I made more money that year than I was making in my yearly salary. So just from that transaction. So I said, wow, how do I do that again? This real estate thing is really powerful. And that's what set me on the path to where I am now. I used the profits from that place to buy an apartment on that Upper West Side where I had always wanted to live. And then about a year later, I bought my first real estate investment, which was actually a piece of property, a piece of raw land in Connecticut, which I then built a house on and started renting out the house. And so over the course of about 10 years, I was doing real estate as a hobby on the side while I was working my job. I moved on from Showtime at that point, was working at a few different digital agencies in New York City. So I was kind of climbing that corporate ladder, moving up and up in my roles and responsibilities at work. But on the side, I did real estate. Fast forward to 2015, 2014, when my wife got approached completely out of the blue with a really fantastic job opportunity. Sorry, it was 2015 out of the blue. She gets approached with a job opportunity, but it's in Miami, Florida. So we moved from New York to Miami. And that is when I made the transition from doing real estate as a hobby to doing real estate full-time. And that was a little over 6 years ago. And I've been a real full-time real estate investor and syndicator ever since.
So do you miss your showbiz time?
Not really, not at all. I still, like I said, my wife and I, we're very involved in the theater community. My wife, that's her full-time job. We invest and have actually co-produced some Broadway shows. So we see shows all the time. We're around that environment. So it's not like I've left any of that behind. But my 9 to 5, instead of auditioning all day for shows and then having to work every night in shows, I'm actually able to do the real estate thing, which is something I'm passionate about and enjoy helping people create passive income so that they're not constrained by their time, because a lot of people are trading time for money. I mean, I know you talk a lot about mindset on this podcast, and part of that, which, I go into in my book, my book talks about these different keystone concepts, and keystone concept number 1 is don't trade your time for money. So if I can help people get to a place where they don't have to trade their time for money, and they can use their time for things that they care about, that they're passionate about, and hopefully move society forward in a positive direction, then that's something that makes me very happy. And that's what I'm looking to do.
So let me ask you this question. From your life, from camera, lights, action to real estate, what skill set did you bring into the real estate from your showbiz career?
Yeah, so my showbiz career was a lot of lights and a lot of action, not so much camera, although I would have loved to have done more film and television, but it was really more on the stage. And there's a number of different parallels that that equate. I think people can take different things as you're going through life. I can talk about things that I learned in the advertising world also that I apply. But when it comes specifically to the theatrical world, one of the biggest things for me was it was always about persistence. Mm-hmm. And it's something I actually share a few stories in the book about persistence before real estate, and then also how that persistence has helped me in real estate. But going out there, auditioning, show after show after show, you have to face a lot of rejection as an actor, and you cannot take it personally. There's a lot of factors that are beyond your control as an actor. You may sing and dance and act or whatever perfectly, but if they're casting a redhead for the mom and a redhead for the dad, and it's you with dark hair like I do, and there's another person who's just as good as me and they have red hair, well, the odds are they're probably going to go with the redheaded guy, right? It's just what's going to happen. And that's beyond my control. And so I think of the same thing when it comes to real estate. I'm always looking to get into a best and final situation, where in theater, my goal was never to get cast in a show. My goal was always to get a callback. So callback is, you may have 100 people auditioning for a particular role, but they will, the casting director and the people, the creative team may say to you, okay, why don't you come back either later that day or at a different date for further auditioning? And they narrow the field down from 100 people, maybe to 10 or 5, right? Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens on a real estate deal where you may be putting in an offer. If you make it into the best and final round, you're one of the very final ones, but there may be something that is out of your control. For instance, maybe you're going in offering, let's say, $10 million on a property, and you're going to finance that property. And somebody else is offering $10 million all in cash, and they can close next week. Mm-hmm. Well, that's something you just can't compete with. That's beyond your control. And you have to not take that personally and just go ahead and move forward. That's just one example of sort of that persistence and follow through that's really important to succeed in real estate and also in life.
Wow, that's a great analogy. I love that. Rejections make you, not break you, right? And that's what you are right now. We are seeing the live proof over here. So let's talk about that a little bit. So initially, when you're getting the rejections, the reason I'm asking you this question is because in the real estate world, we do see a lot of rejections too. First, when you're trying to raise capital, and you might get so many no's, like not even one day, maybe so many days in a row. And then a lot of people, they get turned off. They just feel like, okay, this is not my place. That's where the persistence plays a role, right? If you're persistent with your efforts, it's going to take you somewhere. So I wanted to hear about your journey. Being an actor, you face so many rejections, but that made you, right? That the real you came out. So how was that journey? If you can talk about that a little bit. And when you came to real estate, so now how you're taking these rejections as challenges and turning them into opportunities?
Yeah, well, for me, it was the, like I said, the goal in the theater was to get the call back. And so as long as I got that, I felt like I was successful. Whether I got the show or not, I ended up getting shows, but it was a lot of repetition. It was a lot of going out there, and it was a lot of not just repetition, but also reputation, right? As I got to meet more people and they got to know me, and I was never like a world famous actor, but people in that community, it's a small community, would get to know one another. Or, I might do a show with somebody, and the choreographer for that show happens to be the choreographer on this other show. So they say to the director, "Oh, I worked with Matt before. He's a pleasure to work with," or things of that nature. But the same is true as it comes to real estate, where relationships are really important. So in the real estate game, it took me 2 years to get my first deal. I did not get my first deal as a syndicator for 2 years. I was investing passively in deals, and that's something that I do. I have sort of two tracks when it comes to real estate investment. 2/3 of my portfolio are deals that I'm a limited partner in that I passively invest in, and those are great and I love them. And then I have 1/3 of my portfolio, which is still, it's over 2,300 units. It's a good size. And those are deals that I'm a general partner in. And those are deals that I actively manage. I'm involved in those on a weekly, if not daily basis. And before I got to that point, I was investing passively in deals and looking for my first deal as a sponsor. And as a one of, if you're a real estate agent, real estate broker, and you're dealing with commercial properties, one of the things that's really important to you is, okay, I'm going to bring potential buyers to the person that I represent, who's the seller. But I want to make sure that they're going to be able to close on that deal, because the entire process of, once a purchase and sale agreement is signed, is usually 60 to 90 days. That's not including all the marketing time that goes ahead of, before that. You don't want to be, as a real estate agent or broker who by the way gets paid at closing, right? You don't want to be the person who 90 days later, the seller, the buyer is not performing and is unable to close on the transaction. So for me, as a potential buyer, I needed to develop relationships and trust with the brokers so that they would feel confident bringing my offer to a seller and saying, "Hey, I believe that Matt Picheny is going to be able to close on this deal." The first deal that I got after 2 years of working at this was because of a relationship I had developed with a property manager. And the property manager managed a property that they knew was going to the market. And they introduced me to the real estate agent who had that listing. Thank goodness they did. I didn't know this agent. This agent didn't do a huge amount of volume, so I never would have met that agent. So I met the agent, put in an offer on the deal. All the offers came in too low. The ownership actually pulled the deal from the market. And I spent the next several months chasing that deal down, and finally got it, and pulled it down off market, because it was off market at the time that I got it. But and that's a whole other story. It's a whole chapter in my book about that deal. But that was a big challenge. But again, that persistence, that follow up was important. And you do it in a nice and respectful way. You're not obnoxious about it. By the time I came to my second deal, which was about a year later, I had the trust of the particular broker who had listed the property. I had made it into several best and finals with this person. And that's what used to happen in the acting days. I might make several callbacks and not get cast for a show, but after I've had 3 or 4 callbacks, they sure know me, and then they're like, all right, let's give Matt this part, and that's what happened with this deal. I actually was in best and final. We did not get the deal. It went to somebody else who was a little bit of a higher bidder. About 30 days later, I got a phone call from the broker. The person who was supposed to be buying it could not perform. The seller had gone for the money, the highest amount of money, and not necessarily the most qualified buyer. And they were selling a portfolio of properties and were looking to do a 1031 exchange. So here they are 30 days into the transaction with other transactions that were on the right timeline. And this transaction totally falling off of timeline. They were crunched big time for timing. And this broker came back to me, and I talked with the broker, and I did not have the highest offer at this point in time, but the broker knew me at this point. I had other properties in that area, and so he knew I could close. And he told the seller, "Listen, Matt, I offered a really good terms on the deal. Really short due diligence period. Was going to be able to close very, very quickly. So it helped the seller be able to meet their needs as a 1031 exchange that they were going into." And so was able to get the deal, even though I wasn't the best and highest bid. I mean, I think I was the best from a terms perspective. It just wasn't the highest number. But also the broker was like, "Matt will be able to close on this deal. Like, you have an assurity of close." And that was the most important thing at that point for that seller. And that's, again, just building that relationship. That's I think the most important thing in this business.
And you said very important thing, in your story. Being an actor, you created a nexus around you, or a network around you with the like-minded people, or the people who you think can help you, or you can help. Similar thing you did in the real estate when you moved to real estate. So I have heard this multiple times too. Your network is your net worth. And that's what exactly you did, right? Throughout your life, you build your network, you build your nexus so strong, and it's helping you. So I wanted to understand from you what efforts you're taking now to build your network stronger. Let's talk about that a little bit.
I think that networking, to a certain extent, comes natural to me. It's never anything that I've, I think, consciously done. I've known that if I surround myself with good people, that could help. So as an example, I decided to build a house in Northwest Connecticut with zero experience ever having done that. But what I did know is, well, gee, I need to have people that I can hire who know what they're doing, right? So that's always been important to me, building that council of experts, if you will, or that network, building those relationships. For me, there's a number of ways in which I'm building relationships. Number one, I'm doing podcasts and getting to meet people like yourself, which is really great. And sometimes people from the podcast who hear me will reach out and want to chat and get to know. When I actually had a call with somebody earlier today who heard me on a podcast, somebody who's looking to syndicate deals and just wanted to chat. So that's one of the ways that I do it. I go to a lot of different conferences and speak at some conferences and things of that nature. I have a meetup that I used to run when I lived in Boston that got very popular. And I just moved back to New York 6 months ago, and we're still going through the end, hopefully the end of the coronavirus here, right? But Omicron has just sort of died down. And so that's something that, as things start to open up more and more here in New York, I'm looking to create a meetup here in New York that will hopefully get a lot of people together where you can network. But I go to events all over the country. I have the book that I wrote, and there's a note in the book like, hey, if you want to contact me, here's how you can, because one of the keystone concepts in the book is, your network is your net worth. I mean, I didn't coin that phrase. It's a very well heard phrase, but it really does ring true. And so I highly encourage people to get out there and network, whether it's virtually. You know, I do a lot of these Zoom conferences and Zoom calls that people have, and go on to those and just like to meet people and talk. And you know, for me, the key that I would give to anybody is the secret sauce, the way to really network really well is to add value. So provide value to people. And then that's what I'm all about, is trying to provide value to people, whether they're looking to syndicate their first deal, whether they're looking to passively invest. I mean, my book is really written. It's great for people who want to syndicate deals. There's a lot of good information. It starts off super basic. So for passive investors, it's amazing. You learn what an asset is and what a liability is. But by the end of the book, I'm talking about air rights and 1031 exchanges. So for a more advanced real estate investor, it's also a lot of things that you can learn. But through all of it, I always tell people, hey, talking with people, getting to know people, building that network is the utmost important thing that you can do.
So you mentioned you go to a lot of conferences, and a lot of people do that, you know, that's where you meet a lot of people. So any tips that you wanted to share there when you go to the conference, how you should prepare yourself before going there, and what you should do once you come back from the conference? Because it's not just going to the conference, meeting people, and you think you're going to grow your network that way, because there's something involved before and after. So if you can share that, then we'll talk about your book. I'm pretty sure you mentioned that in the book.
Well, one of the things that I do is I bring a business card, which kind of sounds very basic, but you might be surprised at how many times I'll go to a networking event and I meet people and they seem interesting and I ask them for a card and they don't have one. So make sure you bring a business card. I don't like the digital business cards. A lot of people are using them, you know, where you have like a QR code that you can scan. The reason why I don't like them is because of the second thing that you asked about, which I'll get to in a second. So for me, when I go to a networking event, it's all about talking with people, listening, using my listening skills to understand what it is that they're looking for, the types of people they want to meet, and the types of relationships they are trying to establish, and then try to help them with that. Right. So, you know, sometimes I'll hear somebody's looking for, I'm just going to make it up, deals in Rhode Island. And I know that Joe does deals in Rhode Island. So I'm like, oh, do you know Joe? Let me introduce you to Joe. Like I always try to help by connecting people or providing, like I said, providing some sort of value. I mean, that's the idea of the book, is to provide value to people. Then in terms of following up afterwards, the reason why I like having business cards versus a virtual one is that I can go home and I have a stack of cards that I can start following up with people, sending emails and setting up meetings with them to further the conversation. The reason why I don't like the QR codes is those people just go right into my address book. And then it's like, I have a lot of people in my address book and I don't know who I just met like this time. I mean, I can go through it, but I have to go through, I don't even know. I must have over 1,000 people in my contacts. I have to go through and try to, oh yeah, I just met that person like that. It's quite tedious. So to have a business card is a lot easier for me to go through and not just add them to like my database, which is something that I used to do. I used to take cards, add people to my database, and that was it. And what I found was those people were not very engaged in my database. Didn't really want to necessarily be, I mean, they gave me a card, maybe they felt obligated, I don't know. But I found that it's not very effective. So what I do after a conference is I follow up with people and I send them an email and I ask them, hey, you know, if you want, I can put you on my newsletter database. But I don't add people automatically because I don't think that they're engaged subscribers at that point, in which case, what's the point of really having somebody? So I can say I have X amount of people on my newsletter list. It doesn't make sense. I want people who are on my newsletter list who truly want to be there and are getting value from it. So, but I think that follow-up is extremely important. I'll go to a networking event. I'll hand out if it's a big conference, maybe 100 cards, let's say, and I'll maybe get like 1 or 2 emails of people following up with me.
Yeah, and that's I know other thing I heard about is it's good to have a picture on the business card as well, because that way I like the business card with the picture, because that way I can remember who I met and I can put their name with their face. So otherwise, you have so many business cards and so many names. Sometimes you can't figure out who was Matt or who was Winky. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's what I do. I was just pulling that right here. I got my business card, and I used to have a picture without glasses because I used to not have glasses, and then I got glasses, and I was like, oh, I needed to update my card because people weren't recognizing me. I don't think I looked that different without the glasses, but it's important to have an up-to-date picture on your card so people can remember who you are.
That's true.
Because they're meeting a lot of people at these events. Like I said, if I've passed out 100 cards, there's probably a lot of people who've passed out that many. And sometimes I go home with a stack of like 30, 40 business cards. And it's sometimes can be hard to remember who each person is.
Yeah, it's just like, how we have in the information technology age, we have this 2-factor identification enabled. That's what we're doing with our mind, It's a 2-factor identification, right? One time we saw them, met them, and the second time is we have their business card with the picture. I have my picture on my business card too, by the way. So it's just like you're just giving an affirmation kind of thing, or just making sure that you remember this person. So let's talk about your book, The Backstage Guide to Real Estate. So how did that book come about?
So I ran a meetup group in Boston, and over a period of a few years, we got this group up. So we would have on average 100 people, and sometimes we'd have up to 200 people come to the events. Mm-hmm. And the content that I was curating for the meetup, I would speak once or twice a year, and I would get great speakers to come in. We would have panels. I mean, it was a great education, and trying to get the community in Boston, and they've been great about it, to not solely invest in triple deckers in the Boston area, which is what a lot of people were doing, but to sort of expand their minds and look at maybe investing in other parts of the country, and maybe doing some passive investments with other people, syndicators who are doing this. And as people's mindset was sort of expanding and they were getting open to those ideas, they might start looking into doing one of their first deals as a passive investor. And they would often come to me and say, hey, Matt, I'm thinking about doing this deal. Will you look at me and tell me if I should do it or not? And I would never tell people whether they should do a deal or not, but I would be more than happy to sit down with them and talk through the deal and take a look at the deal and point out things that maybe they want to ask the sponsor about. Like if the sponsor is underwriting 25% rent growth every year for the next 10 years, maybe that's a bit lofty, right? That's never going to happen. So maybe they should ask the sponsor why they're doing that, right? Different things like that. What ended up happening was there were so many people who kept asking me to do this for them that I just was running out of time. I mean, I had my own things to do, and I love helping people, and I didn't mind helping people, but it just got to a point where I didn't have the time in the day to do it and to do all of them. And so I decided to write it all down. And what I did was I put together it was around a 70-page book that I called what did I call it? I called it the passive, the guidebook to the passive investor's handbook. That's what I call it, the passive investor's handbook. Mm-hmm. And it was this really dense information, like just really nitty gritty, number crunching kind of I feel like for people to read it, it was like chewing on cardboard. I mean, for someone like you who's very well versed in real estate, you might find it interesting, right? There's a lot of technical information and jargon in there, but it just was not going to be palatable for most people. And I really wanted this book to be for most people, for passive investors, not for necessarily real estate professionals, but for people who are professionals in other things and wanted to get involved in real estate. And so what I did was I took all of the information that I had in that 70-page book, but expanded it into a 250-page narrative that talks about my story. And look, I have that interesting background where I was an actor and then I was in digital marketing, and I have a lot of fun stories. And I put a lot of humor in this book so that it's not this dry, recitation of technical jargon, but actually teaches people, shares the keystone concepts that I learned on my path with the reader as they're reading. So in the earlier stages, we're talking about assets and liabilities and very basic stuff. And then as we go on, we talk about the networking, we talk about syndications, and we get into the more advanced topics. And through the whole book, there are 60 different real estate terms that I define. So at the end of the book, there's a glossary. You can read all the definitions again if you want to, but it also references you back. There's an index. It references you back to the page where I told that story. So it can be a reference book that people could keep on their bookshelf, hopefully for years to come. But that was really the thought process behind it, was how do I make a book that's easy to read, that is fun and interesting to read, and teaches people the basic concepts they need to know about real estate so that they can passively invest in a deal and feel confident about it, be able to ask the sponsor of those deals good questions so that they really understand the deal and know what they're getting themselves into.
I think that's a good idea, sharing your experiences, because like I say all the time, that we cannot possibly make all the mistakes in our lifetime or do everything in our lifetime on our own, right? There's no possible way. Life is so short. So we should be learning from others' experiences, others' mistakes, or others' achievements, and create a path for ourselves. And I think which is a good way to share your experiences, write a book, or just start a podcast, bring other people's stories to the podcast. And that's the best way you can connect with people and also share your experiences. So now at this point of your life, what inspires you keep on going or doing whatever you're doing?
My kids.
Nice.
It's all about I have two young girls, and they're the world to me. So my wife too, in case she's watching the podcast. But no, I adore my wife and my two children, and so it's all about my family.
So now you're full-time real estate. So there is no desire to go back into acting career at any point?
No, look, I would never trade those 5 years for anything. They're part of who made me what I am today. And I love the fact that I'm still involved in theater as a producer, which is fantastic. I partner with my wife on those things, and it's wonderful. I love doing that, and still being involved in the theater community. But I don't really have a desire to go back. And I mean, I guess if someone begged me to do something, I might consider it, but I don't. I don't see that. I'm way out of shape. I mean, when I was an actor, I used to work with acting coaches all the time. I have a vocal coach that I work with at least once a week. Voice classes and dance and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I sing in the shower. But and in my car, I love to rock out in my car when I'm driving. But beyond that, it's not something that I desire to pursue anymore. Although I love it, I have a respect for it and a passion for it. But also as a performer, you don't get to see a lot of theater because you're doing shows while the other shows are going on. At this point in my life, I can go see stuff all the time. I live in New York City. I hop on a train. I can go see Broadway shows, see a lot of stuff off Broadway. One of the things that's really cool is my wife and I are working on a couple of new musicals that are in development. And so that's really fun, exciting, and bringing new work to life is something I've always wanted to do. So it's a special thing for me.
So real estate gives you that option to sit on the other side of the stage to watch the show, right?
It certainly has 100%.
Great. So tell me your why.
I'll tell you real quick that the subtitle for my book, Backstage Guide to Real Estate, is Produce Passive Income, Write Your Own Story, and direct your dollars towards positive change. And so my own story, writing my own story. So I've produced passive income, continuing to do that. And that's allowing me to write my own story, which is being on the other side of the stage, right? And I'm directing my dollars towards positive change. And I'm doing that in 3 ways. In number one, through all the business that we do, we look for only win-win deals where we can make improvements to communities, make lives better for residents, for the staff, and also for the investors. It's not a charity. We're there to make money, but we do believe that the bottom line is more than just dollars and cents, and that you can do well by doing good, be an ethical business person, and still make a very nice profit. So that's what we're doing on that side. And the other way I'm directing my dollars towards positive change is, look, I do charitable contributions all the time now because I have money with which I'm fortunate enough that I can do that. And also through funding these theatrical investments. Look, the theater's very risky. 80% of Broadway shows do not recoup their initial investment. So there's a lot of risk involved in these. But I think, there is a monetary gain that can be had if a theater production does well. But also, I think from a societal perspective, a lot of the shows that we invest in, the vast majority of the shows that we invest in and we're helping develop, are ones that have some sort of social impact message. And I think that theater can do that. I think theater can be a way for people to maybe look at a subject in a different way that they haven't seen before. You're looking through somebody else's eyes, and can sort of expand. I know I've learned tons of things from going and seeing shows, but wow, I never looked at it that way before. They've got a point there. So, if we can do that through theater, I think that's also positive change. And so, trying to create some ripples of positivity in the world, I think is a good thing, because I don't know, there's a lot of negativity out there as well. So I try to do my force for good.
That's good. So what tips can you share about writing your own story? Because I love that phrase, write your own story or create your own life, because everybody has a power to do that. But I guess we just get so caught up with our day-to-day rut rat that we forget we have that power to write our own story. So I would like you to share some tips with our listeners or viewers. Like, what can they do to make space in their mind so that, they're like aligned with themselves and trying to create the life that they want?
Sure. I actually wrote an article that was in Fast Company about writing your own story. And what I talk about in the article is finding things that you're passionate about and figuring out ways that you can get involved in them. But I think that what your question also, towards the end of your question, really got into sort of a, I know that your podcast is a lot about mindset, sort of mindset, and how do you create that space and set goal. I mean, you're really talking about goal setting here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I'm always working on. I actually went to a goals retreat, and if I may, I hope it's okay. I'm just going to tell you about the goals retreat that I went to in January. It was run by the real estate guys. They have a goal retreat that they do every January, and I'll tell you, it's little over 2 days of really creating that space and setting goals. Mm-hmm. And then there's other people like, my good friend and mentor, Rod Khalif. He whenever he does his boot camp sessions and things of that nature, he does a whole goal setting thing for, a good hour where he's talking and gets people to sort of envision where they want to go. Mm-hmm. And some people talk about creating these like vision boards, where they'll talk about things that they want, maybe a dream house or a boat or a car or, whatever that sort of dream ideal lifestyle is that you want. Actually creating a vision board, like cutting out of a magazine or maybe printing out from the internet, right? And creating a vision board that you look at and that you see every day. I know this guy who just posted something on a post on Facebook, but it had his desktop screen on it. And I looked at the desktop screen and it was his vision board. And it had like some cool pictures of things he wanted to do. And then had charts of like how much passive income he wants to create each year. And I was like, wow, because you're sitting there, you're looking at your desktop every day, if you're on your computer, and to have that as the background for your desktop is you're constantly seeing that. And the more you see these things, the more that they manifest in your life. And people tell all kinds of stories about that. You know, Robert Helms from the Real Estate Guys was telling a story at the Goals retreat about, I don't remember the car, but like there was some like cool car that he wanted. And he was very young. I think he was like, 18 or 17 or whatever. And he had a picture of it, and he had some beat up car, and he put it in the visor of the car. And every time he got in his car, pulled the thing down to shade his eye, he would see this picture of this car. And I don't know, 5-10 years later, he's driving around the car that he had because he kept seeing it every day. And that was like a goal he was working towards. So there's all kinds of really cool mindset tricks and things that you can do to help sort of set those goals and envision them and go towards them. And that's something that I'm always working on. I'm always updating my goals on a yearly basis, trying to figure out where I want to go, what are the next steps for me, and then the most important thing once you've got the goal is how to execute it, right? What mechanics you need to do to actually reach those goals.
Wow, that was really good. And you said it very well. You have the goals, but you need to have the whole plan to execute that too. Because if you do not have the plan to execute, it's not going to go anywhere. The goal is going to stay wherever it is. But I'm going to ask you for one golden nugget. It's not like that you didn't tell me enough, but just like I'm hungry, right? More. So share one golden nugget with our audience.
Oh, golden nugget. For me, my whole investment strategy boils down to something that my dad told me when I bought my first apartment, which is that you never lose money in real estate if you never have to sell. That flows directly into keystone concept number 5 from my book, which is cash flow is king, right? So as long as you have that cash flow, you don't have to sell. And so the one thing I can be sure about in terms of predictions is I know that the real estate market will go up in the future. And I know that the real estate market will go down in the future. Right? I don't know when it's going to go up, when it's going to go down, how far it'll go up or down, or for how long, but I know it's going to move. But there's always movement, and it moves in cycles just like the rest of the economy. And as long as I have a cash flowing asset, I can hold on to that property. If things are not a good real estate market, I can hold on to it to another time when it's more advantageous to go ahead and make a sale. So that would be my golden nugget, is sort of cash flow is king. You never lose money if you don't have to sell. So you get a cash flowing asset, and you're in good shape.
That's a really good one, actually, because I have experienced that in my life, that we sold one of our properties at the wrong time because we were not savvy enough very early on when we got into real estate, like late 90s. But now, if I have a choice, I would never do that. Like you said, if it's a cash flowing property, why you want to sell? It's a positive cash flow, sit on it. Sit through all the cycles. And we made that mistake, but we learned from that mistake. So this brings us to our final round, the rapid fire round. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. So you're going to answer in 1 sentence or 1 word only. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. So who was the most influential person in your life?
Kiyosaki.
What is the best book you ever read or recommend?
Oh, I can't say Kiyosaki now, can I?
Yes, you can.
I'm going to go with The One Thing, Gary Keller, The One Thing.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, what is your book name? The Backstage of Real Estate?
Oh, Backstage Guide to Real Estate. Can I do that? I feel like that's cheating. I feel like that's cheating. Again.
Let me ask you that. What is the best book you ever read or recommend?
I'm still not going to recommend my own book. I love it, but I'm going to say The One Thing, Gary Keller. Yeah.
What is your biggest passion?
Theater. No, sorry. Music is number 1 for me.
Music is really good because I've heard the people who are musically inclined, their mind is wired differently because they tap into certain vibrations, the higher vibrations than the average person.
Do you notice what I have over there? See my guitar?
Yes, I know. I have like 6 guitars at my home. My son plays guitar. Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you play?
No, I don't. But my husband, he sings. My son plays guitar. So we have multiple guitars. We have the whole sound system at our house.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to come over and hang out.
Yeah, of course. I love that. So the next question I'm going to ask you, in one word, what does life mean to you?
Love,
That's a good one. What is your favorite food?
pasta,
Good. How can people reach out to you?
Picheny.com. I'll spell that. P like in Peter, ICHENY.com. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes, but that's where you can get my book or the newsletter that I have, or I have a blog. I write lots of real estate education information, and it's all on there for free. So it's a good resource.
Thanks, Matt. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
So did I. It was a lot of fun.